We're going to talk about the top foods that can ruin and destroy your liver. I'm talking from a lot of experience because I have ruined my liver from the foods that I've eaten in the past. That was my weak link, and I had no idea at the time I was destroying my liver. So as I go through these foods, don't be offended. I'm just increasing awareness. And these are really common foods. And unfortunately, a lot of these foods are in the restaurants that you go to, and they use the cheapest ingredient. I mean, if you look at like even the kids menu, it's just the worst food that you can eat. There's a lot of hidden maltodextrin, which is like, it's worse than sugar, even though it's not classified as a sugar. It's like a filler. They use really cheap oils like soy oil and corn oil. So you're getting a lot of stuff that you don't even know you're getting. And this is probably why you leave the restaurant and feel bloated and you don't feel very good when you consume these foods. So there's three main problems with the liver. You have inflammation, you have a fatty liver, and you have scar tissue that eventually turns into something called cirrhosis. And if you ever look at someone who has cirrhosis, their skin does not look good. Usually, if it's a guy, they're skinny, but they have this pot belly. That's called ascites. That's a fluid filled sac in their gut. It's not fat because the liver is leaking this fluid into the sac because the liver is very, very sick. And a lot of times they're kind of yellowish. The whites of the eyes are yellow. Their skin is kind of yellowish. It's called jaundice. Definitely alcohol is a big culprit, but a lot of people are having what's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I mean, the stats are just going off the charts, especially with younger kids even. So we're going to go through these foods, okay, and also talk about what foods to reverse these problems, because one cool thing about the liver is that it can take a beating, but it can regenerate. It's very regenerative, but there's always a point of limitation. All right, let's start with number one, fried foods, okay? I'm talking about the fried foods. Maybe at a restaurant, you're going to get these fried things, which are not going to be fried in healthy oils. They're going to be fried in seed oils like corn, canola, cottonseed, soy oil. All of those are GMO, so you're going to get the glyphosate. And yes, they're very inflammatory, but another thing that these seed oils do, which are omega-6 oils, is they tend to invade our tissues and become part of our cell membranes. We're not even talking about the effects of that down the road. Not good, especially if it's in your arteries and it's making things very, very brittle and very inelastic. So one common fried food would be when you fry a starch, like in potato chips, right? We have potatoes, okay? We have vegetable oil, cottonseed oil. Now, when you think of a vegetable, do you think of a cotton seed? No. Okay. Next one is corn oil. Is corn a vegetable? No, I don't think it is, but they're calling it a vegetable oil. And what about sunflower? I don't really consider that a vegetable. Maybe it is, but it's kind of a seed. So that's the vegetable oils that they're going to fry this stuff in. And so when you take high heat, you take a starch, okay, and you cook it with a fat, it binds and it develops something called advanced glycation end products. It's this form of glycation, basically, where you're bonding a fat to a sugar, okay, because that carbohydrate is going to break down the sugar, and then it's going to create problems and build up and accumulate and create inflammation, okay? Where? Liver, other tissues. Here's another chip that I used to consume massive amounts. Okay, let's see what's in here. We have potatoes, all right? Vegetable oil, corn, cottonseed. We have also soy oil. Then we have corn flour, rice flour, maltodextrin. Okay, can't forget that. And wheat starch. This will definitely increase your blood sugar, and it's going to turn into sugar really quick. Probably with the maltodextrin, it's definitely over 100 on the glycemic index. So you're going to be converting a lot of this to fat on your liver, and that's not going to be good. But man, do they make these taste good. They have, I don't know what's in there. You can't just have one. They're very addicting. And as soon as I start consuming these, not now, in the past, I will not be able to stop. All right, number two, canned meat products. So in college, okay, I didn't have a lot of money. So I'd go to these discounted grocery stores and get these canned Hormel chilies and all these different canned meats. I'm not talking about sardines or canned tuna. I'm talking about canned meat like Spam and all sorts of stuff. And with those canned meats, they add in there corn flour, modified cornstarch, textured soy flour. They're adding all these other stuff in there. Not good, because when you combine a carbohydrate with a fat, or a carbohydrate with a protein especially, you're going to create that glycation again. And that glycation is going to plug up the liver. It can go into the tissues in the eyes, into the heart, the arteries, into the brain, all over the place. Again, not only increasing inflammation, but also increasing insulin, which actually creates more fat. So we have fried foods like chips. We have canned meat products, right? Because there's a bunch of stuff in there. And number 3, we have my favorite, TV dinners, which I used to love, right? You ever look at the ingredients in a TV dinner? Wow, it's scary. So I found one that looked very appetizing. You have meatloaf. I used to love meatloaf. In fact, when I was in college, I got this recipe from my grandmother, who used to make it really delicious. I didn't fully read it. I just kind of scanned it, and I made this meatloaf. So I took a pound of hamburger, and I took a loaf of like white bread and with ketchup, and I mixed it all together. And then I consumed it one sitting. Okay. Yeah. Well, guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to drain all the grease out of there. So I basically consumed all of the fat with the ketchup and all the sugar that comes with it. Needless to say, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a severe gallbladder problem. I went to the drugstore trying to buy some over-the-counter medication, which did not work. I didn't know it was my gallbladder at the time. I was completely oblivious. But meatloaf, boy, you're just cooking this carb with this meat, and you're creating more glycation. You're creating more liver problems and gallbladder issues. And with that inflammation creates more insulin resistance, which raises your blood sugar and creates more visceral fat around the liver and fat inside the liver, which is called ectopic fat. The fat is actually outside the fat cell, and it's going into the organs, and it's creating dysfunction with the liver itself. So with this TV dinner, it normally comes with modified food starch, wheat flour, dextrose, modified corn starch, and we can't forget sugar, right? We're going to mix all these ingredients, and we're going to eat this stuff, right? Not the best food for the liver. All right, number 4, nachos. In college, I would take this can of cheese something and pour that on these chips, right, with salsa. So of course in the chips you have the corn flour, which is all GMO, with glyphosate, another chemical, and then you have all the oils, right? And then we have the cheese sauce, right? Be lucky if there's actually cheese in the cheese sauce. And also, let's say, for example, you go somewhere to a fast food restaurant, right, where they're doing deep frying. How many times did they actually change the oil? A lot of times they won't change it for weeks, sometimes months, and you're getting your food fried in there over and over and over again. That's going to create a lot of oxidative stress to your cells if you eat the food that's fried in there. It's usually going to be a carbohydrate. All right, number 5, canned tomato soup. Now, I'm picking on tomato soup, but there's probably other ones too. And I happened to look at the ingredients in this tomato soup, which I also used to consume a lot of. And they're not just tomatoes in there. There is a ton of sugar and wheat flour and other chemicals. And just in 1/2 of a cup, that's 4 ounces. That's just a tiny bit. There's actually 4 teaspoons of sugar, 16 grams of sugar. And who consumes a 1/2 of a cup of the soup? You're going to eat the whole can, right? I mean, at least one. And what does that come out to? That's actually 8 teaspoons of sugar. It creates fat, and it creates inflammation and oxidative stress. All right, number 6, this is kind of a category of a bunch of foods that have high fructose corn syrup in it. Now, the fructose in high fructose corn syrup is different than the fructose from fruit. Don't buy into this idea that, oh, it's the same molecule, right? There's a lot of differences, right? You have this highly processed thing from corn, and they manipulate it. And then over here, you have in nature, it's a different product. Plus, you have all the protective things in fruit that might protect you against diabetes and things like that. Over here with the high fructose corn syrup, we don't have that. But I'm talking about like liquid candy, like soda. I'm talking about jellies. You know, I remember going to restaurants and taking the little jellies that they would have on the table and just consuming one, just without even thinking twice. I never really looked at the ingredients, but that's high fructose corn syrup. Ketchup, high fructose corn syrup. Candy, bread, applesauce, maple syrup, agave nectar, whipped cream, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So out of all the sugars that are bad for your liver, fructose is at the top of the list. Your liver treats fructose like alcohol, like a toxin. And you can create a lot of serious insulin resistance problems and a fatty liver and inflammation of the liver, which leads to the cirrhosis. So I think fructose is right up there at the top of the list as far as what damages the liver. And number 7, this actually includes something called an aflatoxin, which is a type of mold that has been known to cause liver cancer. And you're probably going to see this more in Asia or Africa, especially if you're consuming cereals or legumes and grains. But it grows as a mold in certain environments. But if you have the Valencia organic peanut butter, that one is pretty good. Chances are it's not going to have this aflatoxin. That's the type of peanut butter that I consume on my celery. Also, if you avoid grain, I think you're going to be fine as well. Now, as far as the foods that are really good for the liver to help regenerate the liver, the cruciferous vegetables, kale, broccoli, arugula, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, and the list goes on. Any of the raw vegetables are good for the liver. A moderate amount of high quality grass-fed protein is very healthy for your liver. Eggs are good because it's high in choline, which is good to help reduce fat on the liver. Also, anything with like omega-3 fatty acids, like cod liver oil, as well as fish, salmon, are really good for the liver as well. Refined food is not good for the liver, especially if it's cooked, okay, or preserved. Now, if you're not already signed up on my newsletter at drbird.com, I'm going to share with you a lot of information that you will not find on YouTube. So if you want to check it out, I put the link down below. I will see you on the other side.